think he has a special guest you may want to bring up.
Yeah, I have a few, depending on if they feel like coming up. But Bill Koch is here.
Oh, wow.
Really? Brad Goldstein is here. He didn't bring his dog. Vincent Bertaramo is here. I don't know if you want to just stay and wave or come on. It's up to you. And Jim Wynne. Both of them are less, I think, into the Q&A.
Great. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us here. So I'm gonna begin with just a couple quick questions for. Yeah, please come on up. I'll start with a couple quick questions for you, and then open it up to the audience. So, Reuben, I'll start with you, and the very basic question of how did you get involved with this, but also were you involved in the world of wine? Were you a wine connoisseur yourself before starting this?
I knew I liked to drink it, but that was about it. My father-in-law sort of introduced me to Barolos that I liked, but I didn't know they were that good. But I mean, if I drank more than a glass of wine at dinner, my Jewish mother would count. So it was a lot in my family growing up.
And then in terms of how you got involved with the story, like how did you first hear about Rudy, and how did you actually start telling the story?
I read about Rudy's story after he was arrested, and I found out that his trial was taking place in downtown Manhattan. And so I went, and the courtroom was a cast of characters, and they could have all played themselves in the fictionalized version of his story. And that's actually where I met Bill as well.
And so, Mr. Koch, did multiple people talk to you about this story before you decided to participate in this? Talk a little bit about sort of getting your story out, how you were affected by it.
Well, what I found was absolutely fascinating is that I knew a lot of other big wine drinkers, and I went around and saw a lot of vineyards, as a matter of fact. And there was a code of silence in this industry, I'm afraid. In fact, I bought a lot of fake wine from charity auctions, if you believe that, as well as from Christie's and other big auction houses, Acromero and Zacky's, and a whole bunch of them. But I found that the auctioneer doesn't care. All he wants is the margin off. It's like a used car salesman. All he cares about. In fact, we found one guy who was had to join, or the auction house had to join up with a retail seller here to obey the New York laws. And the head counsel, female of this big auction house, very prestigious, I'm afraid to mention their name. I sued them anyway. Anyway, this guy said, "Why are we selling this fake wine?" And this woman said, "Well, we're in the business of making a margin off what we sell. We're not in the authentication business. Authentication is nothing more than an opinion." So she turned her back on it completely. And they were making a great amount of money on it. I also found out when I talked to some other people that I knew that had fake wine, they didn't want to talk about it because the collector doesn't want his collection to be contaminated. And then I found if he finds out that he has fake wine, he wants to put it back in the auction to recycle, to get his money back. Or he wants to give it to a charity and let some other guy take it. So I found out there's a real code of silence. In fact, I tried to ask even Jim Wynne of the Bellagio, is it Bellagio casino out in, he found a whole lot of wine, fake wine in his collection. I called him up and said, "Would you help me?" He said, "Yeah, it'd be great to go in with you." And then he said, "Turn it over to his restaurant staff." And they wouldn't talk to us at all because they didn't want to have a reflection that they had wine in it. They said it all cleaned it out. And I even went to a bunch of vineyards, including Domini Romanicante. This guy, what's his name? Aubrey. I told him, "You got fake wine?" He said, "Nobody can fake my wine." He didn't want to know about it either.
So I mean, one big question that is in the film is sort of Rudy, and sort of, was he doing this all very deliberately, or did he just get over his head? Or, you know, it's interesting that so many people are still sort of can't separate the Rudy that they had fun with and was their friend with the Rudy that was defrauding people. So I mean, what do you think, or you know, either of you, what do you think about what Rudy's sort of motivation was, and how the film sort of represents that?
I would rather hear Jim Wynne's version on that. Where is he? I had mine.
I waved at him a few minutes
Yeah,
ago.
I hope he didn't sneak out.
Here he comes.
Rudy was a con man. His motivation was money. It's as simple as that. And these people were conned into believing his story. And he just wrote that and wrote it and wrote it.
You know, I got to tell you, I'm sorry. Yeah, right after I testified in the Rudy trial, his lawyer came up to me after as I was walking out and said, Rudy shouldn't have been a faker. He would have been a great wine creator, mixer. And that was his real talent. And he turned that, and he couldn't help himself because he was a crook.
All right. Just curious, in the audience, what do you think? I mean, raise a hand. Do you think he was just basically out for the money and was a crook? Okay, most of the people. Okay. How many people just think he kind of got out of control and sort of was, you know, just trying to sort of enter into the stratus of society that he wasn't necessarily part of? Ego. A few people. All right. I'd love to open it up to questions from the audience as well at this point. Yes, right here.
To the director, I thought you did a great job in putting on film a complicated story. I've been following this in the wine magazines. This is the first film I've seen about it. I expect it won't be the last film. Were you racing to complete this film because there's others coming out? Have you, other sources, been approached by other filmmakers on this topic?
Thanks. We weren't racing, but when I met my co-director, we had started separately. We started the film separately, and he had been approached by producers in Burgundy to follow Laurent Ponceau, and we met at trial, and we were, half of the room was filled with journalists and reporters and other filmmakers, and the other people were involved in the story. And so there would be, when they said that the press could come and take a look at Rudy's bottles, there was a mad rush to go in, and standing in the back of the line was Jerry and I, who were super aggressive, and that's how we started collaborating. And there were, at that point, 4 other films in the works. And I think us pairing up helped. But there's like, I don't know, 3 narrative films being developed. There's,
Bill and I would joke. We were approached by so many film directors. We would joke. I think David Niven was going to play Bill, and Danny DeVito was going to play me.
American Greed has done a feature on this story.
And so has Rudy sold his life for the story? I mean, how does that work? Like, if he's somebody that's convicted, can he profit off of this further? Do you know?
he, as far as I know, has not talked to anybody.
Yes, right here, please.
You said it could have been one thing or another why he went down this road, but what about his family in Indonesia? Was he the Navy? Was all his brothers said, we're onto something here, funnel us the money this way and that way and the other, so maybe not enough is talked about that?
So it's questions about the family back in Indonesia and sort of their role in this, and sort of how much you were able to get out about them.
So we chased them everywhere. All right. So we chased them through their apartments, and they didn't want to talk. I mean, we chased them through their apartments in Hong Kong. They didn't want to talk. We went to China. We went to the beer factory in China. They never heard of them. So the more we more we traveled, the less they wanted to talk. So they're not.
There was no government cooperation.
It's very difficult to get information out of there. It's like a black hole. And this certainly was a family business. He sent $12 million to Dar and $6 million to Teddy. And the mother was living very well here.
One thing we found out is they wanted to negotiate a settlement with us, which we did. We tried to negotiate a settlement and we put a price tag to them, and they said they'd pay us back, and then we never heard from them again. They said it was too much money, didn't they, Brad? So they're, who knows?
Right here, please.
How has the process of authentication for wine evolved since this heist?
How has the process of authentication evolved since this heist happened?
Well, I don't know. We hired so many bloody experts. I can't.
We created
We-
the industry.
We did it. In fact, as part of this, we had ex-FBI agents, we had a Scotland Yard guy, we had an Interpol guy, we had a
Couple CIA guys.
couple CA guys.
Couple M16 guys.
Yeah, we had a whole army out there going after it because no one else would do it, and only Jim Wynne was the other guy that would support us. Everybody said no, it's wine. Bunch of rich guys got screwed, so what? Well, we did.
Since this case, there have been at least, we used 3 experts in terms of being wine experts who would look at bottles and authenticate things. We used an expert that they used in their trial, their civil trial in Southern District in April of 2013. And we used 2 other experts who assisted us in identifying the fakes that were either seized at Rudy's house or fakes that were collected from collectors or from auction companies.
A lot of the labels we found were Xerox copies. We even had a label that looked like it had cobwebs on it, but it was a Xerox copy. And as you heard me say out there, we had an expert come in on materials, and he found the paper was made in 1983, not in 1885. And the glue was put on it was Elmer's glue. I think I said up there. So a lot of them, some of them they were very, very clever, and they used a lot of techniques, but it took a lot to dig into it. You know, I hate to say it, but I was a big dupe too. Cost me $4 million. I lost $4 million in the wine. I could tell you, I spent $35 million in lawsuits and investigations going after these guys. I was the only one to do it, except for the FBI here.
And do you feel that the punishment Rudy received is enough, or?
Hell no, he should have been quartered. Sorry.
Let's go right back, please. Yes.
The question's for Bill. Do you still collect French wine, or at least drink it? And if you don't, are you planning to sell your cellar?
Well, I calculated how long it would take me and my friends and family to drink 43,000 bottles. When the number came up to 175 years, I said, I got too much wine. So I sold 20,000 bottles, and I still have 23,000 left, and I drink that. But I don't buy any new wine. I did buy, actually that's wrong, I almost had a Freudian slip, I say nude wine. Because there is a wine made in California called Marilyn Monroe. And it has pictures of Marilyn Monroe on it. Some of the pictures are nude.
Let me go.
My wife is squirming over here.
Let me go right here, please.
Can you talk a little bit more about the source of the footage you had of Rudy?
Yeah, so the source of the footage of Rudy, because Rudy did not participate in interview requests, right?
There was a filmmaker in LA who was making a pilot about rising stars in the wine world in like 2002. And he followed Rudy for like 2 days, and it was about 9 hours of footage.
But Brad you got the footage, didn't you, Brad? You're the one who got it.
Yeah, so we were going to use that footage in a sentencing hearing. That's why we wanted it. and so we could show it to Judge Berman.
So we have time for maybe 2 more questions. So I will go here, please. Yes.
So, Reuben, congratulations, a great movie. But you know what really strikes me is that it's really not about Rudy. It's, you know, this has been going on since the beginning of time. Whether it's Rudy or Madoff or whomever, or two of their paintings. And actually, he wasn't really good at it either. I mean, in the sense that, you know, just putting fake years on vintages didn't even exist. I think that, you know, the way you capture the people who got duped and their willingness, their willful ignorance to keep on believing and even forgiving, essentially. Mr. Koch doesn't forgive, but almost everybody else forgave this guy, and I think it's a great story about human nature. It's not really about religion, it's human nature, the willingness for people to kind of.
And I might tell a little story. This is half the story. There's another big faker that we think Rudy copied from, and that's a guy by the name of, what's his name, Brad? Hardy Rodenstock. And he's the one that made these fake Thomas Jefferson bottles, which I paid $100,000 per damn bottle. Of course, we all want to think we got the most unusual thing in the world, and we're proud of it. I used to show these Jefferson bottles off to friends. Now I show off the fake bottles to friends. But you're right about that. We were trying to set Hardy Rodenstock up to come over to the United States, because he's German, and get him so we could sue him here in the States. But he wrote me back. I wrote him a bunch of emails, not emails, but he had a fax machine, a bunch of faxes. And he wrote me back a fax saying, "Why are you so worried about it? Even Jesus faked wine. He turned water into wine." We wanted to get him into a court in the Bible Belt, you know?
Let's go right here, yes.
Great job, Reuben. You know what's fascinating? That he was counterfeiting bottles of wine that no one would ever open and drink. Because if you open them, the juice wasn't what it was supposed to be.
Well, sometimes actually, one of his abilities was to actually make pretty good wine, and that he was able to. His genius was that he had a certain palate, and I think it's debatable whether he was blind tasting or faking blind tastings. But everybody said, if you were at a tasting with Rudy, he could close his eyes and tell you the year, date, place of the wine. That he had this sort of amazing memory. And I do think, to the extent that a lot of these guys were fooled who drank with him, I don't think anybody could have pulled off the con the way he did.
So okay, one last question, then we're done. Yes, please.
What regulations would you like to see put into place to prevent more things like this from happening in the future?
Well, I'll answer that question because I've been duped. I look at it and say, you can't regulate everything. You know what? And if I found out from regulations, people get to the Congress or get to the Senate, get regulations that benefit them and hurt their competitors. The best thing is what I was trying to do was to shine a bright light on this, point it out, and let the buyer beware. And get knowledgeable if you really want to spend a lot of money on old antiques. You've got to know something about it, otherwise you're going to get taken. It's been a common practice throughout history. I'll just tell you one other funny thing, and then one of one of Hardy Rodenstock's big wine importers was a little boutique wine importer here in the United States. And in order to get people to come to their tastings, one of the owners married a porn star. And he would always sit the porn star next to a wine writer that would write up the wines that he was tasting. I won't go any further.
All right. And on that note, I want to thank you so much, Reuben, for bringing the film. I want to thank you all for participating in the Q&A.